have the button.
Do perfect. You got the power. All
Yep.
right. All right. So let me pull this up. And so those of you that are new, welcome. Today's topic is community ideas, sort of. We'll talk about what that means. And so Alex was in Phoenix this week. We had 45 people sign up to do his make and take full day session, and 60 showed up. So I would say it was well attended. And then next week, I think he's going to kind of do some sharing out of the things that they've learned and takeaways that folks have walked away with of what they're aiming to do after that session. If you are new to Lifecycle Insights and have not received a calendar invite for Wednesdays at 1, then reach out to Amy on the chat and she'll make sure you're on the invite. And then if any of you are going to Exchange in Dallas, you should let me know. I'll be speaking, I think, on the last day on the main stage session. So that's kind of exciting. But that is where we are on that. And we do have some webinars coming up. So we have the Taylor Business Group is going to come do a presentation on Tuesday, February 8th with us about kind of the evolving journey for MSPs. And then the same week we have the folks who run the peer groups for ASCII. We're going to do a presentation with them on delivering the QBRs your customers deserve. Probably something most of you have already heard from us, but if you're interested in either of those, keep an eye on your inbox on Monday for the weekly email, as there will be links to that in there. I am taking some notes to make sure I cover the pieces that we wanted to talk about today, which stemmed from the very first piece was, let me check, let me grab the chat and pull it over.
It's just me.
Oh, okay, perfect, thank you. I'd love to pull the chat over, but I can't, so I'll just make it disappear. There we go. So we had a partner email and ask if there were any places where partners had conversations around assessments they were building, using, if they wanted to collaborate on any. He specifically used the term, love to collaborate with folks around resilience assessments or other cybersecurity assessments that they are building. To which I said, are you a member of our MSP Geek Slack channel or the Facebook group? So Amy, after this call, we want to put in the Facebook group, would anybody, be interested in sort of collaborating around assessments? Because I told him I would take, get some feedback on that. So I'm curious where folks are with assessments. And I've got two things. I'll trade you a piece of information from you, a piece of information from us. We have had partners that have donated the NIST assessment template, as well as one of the CMMCs, which I will happily drop in the chat. I'm curious if folks have built their own, looking at new types, or want to collaborate on any specific type of assessment that we could help kind of organize around. So thoughts?
I forgot Marnie can't see chat. We have, so Alex and I built CIS version 8. And I don't know if that's in your shared list of templates. If it's not, I have it, Alex has it. We can give you CIS V8 if you want that. I've got it, Alex has it.
So I don't think that is the one I have, but then I'm going to throw the two that I just found from his files. But yeah, absolutely would love to share that. I think the more the merrier on this type of situation. And
I've been chatting with Alex about building a better pre-sales assessment.
Okay.
Not that yours is bad, it's just not, it doesn't make a lot of sense if I wanted to give it to a client to fill out, right?
Oh, gotcha. So to make a more client-facing interview type of question.
Or like pre-sales assessment.
Or prospect, rather. Yeah. I just threw the two templates I did find into the chat. So one's the CMMC and one's the version 1.1. again, which a partner donated to us and said that we could share for folks. So if you want either of these assessments, you're welcome to download them. You can import them into your site. I will show you how to do that if you have not imported assessments. So we've got some folks who are relatively new to Lifecycle Insights on the call. So I want to make sure that we help everybody along the way. Oh, maybe I'm.
How do I export? I want to go export my CIS one.
Oh, all right. Well, I'll show you that right out of the gate. If you go into assessment events and you
Yeah.
click into the assessment itself,
Yeah.
or I could have downloaded on that screen actually, or you can download right in here. So if you export that way. So does that,
I will warn you, the CIS 18 is a beast and it takes a long time to load. Where the hell's the export button again?
top right, or if you're in the return to events list, you can download right from here.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, but it's only showing me Word.
Oh yeah, we only have these in Word. Unless you want to.
I have a CSV that you can use to import. I'll go grab that.
Okay, yeah, grab that and put it in the chat. And I'll grab it out of there. If you have one of these, so if you just downloaded one and want to pull one in assessment templates, there's the ability to import from CSV. Here's the important part, top left. You want to download the template just so you can see what the formatting needs to look like. The two that I shared with you are already in the correct format because we had them built that way. But here it's a pretty basic format, but you do need to do some, Excel mangling to get that into the right format. So if you're interested. Oh, Kirk, so you guys are going to review your assessment in 2 weeks. Kirk, would you mind chatting? Because you have a unique assessment strategy. Would you mind talking about your 3 types of assessments and then what your 6-month go over is?
Yeah, so essentially when we do an onboarding for a client, we kind of don't take on any other clients. And so during that time frame, we're doing a lot of the documentation. And then on average, about after 2 weeks, we have the sit down kind of here's where we see the immediate issues and let's work on some immediate projects. And then we follow up with about 1 month later, then 2 months later, and then go to a quarterly rhythm. So that way it helps us build, because my concern is you're onboarding a client and then you're waiting for a quarter to then have your first, hey, by the way, your backups have been broken for a year. So it's better to get those hot topics out of the way. And that way you can also get those recommendations that are more critical done first and then slowly work down a list. I don't like giving a new client, here's your 20 recommendations. I like to say, here's 5 that are high risk or high reward. And then down the road at maybe our 2-month or 3-month, once we get those covered, here's some of the phishing testing would be great. Getting a canary in there would be great. But now that we got your server kind of fixed and your backups going, now these are kind of lower on the list, but still needing to be done. And then what we try to do is have every 6 months, just go over our assessments. What no longer needs to be a question in there. Like, do we need to have a whole section on Exchange servers? Do we need a whole section on dealing with Blackberries? I mean, you're looking at what old tech can be removed. I'm going to be filling out a lot more on cyber liability insurance because originally it's, do you have it? Yes, no. Now it's like, what is your waiting period? When is your renewal? Those types of situations. So it's more or less keeping a living document and making sure that we're asking the right questions, that we're not asking stupid questions that no longer exist, that everything's NA on, do you have a BlackBerry server? It's like, okay, what update do you have on your Palm OS devices? It's like, you get rid of those and then you move in new ones as new threats, new services. Like, we've added in password managers. Do they have that? We've added in a whole HR policy side of, what do you have as far as your BYOD? Do you have these things written out in your HR handbook that you need to talk to your businesses about. And the way I bring it up is, especially with COVID, a lot of people were thrown personal devices and told to work from home, which is fine, but did you update your HR policy for BYOD that if you let them go, do you have the authority to wipe their data, and are they warned that their data is going to be wiped? So those are the types of things that we constantly update.
It's funny when you say mentioning out of date pieces. Amy saw in our policies that had been outdated, like it referred to the Bluetooth. She's like, "Oh, that's adorable. Do you have anything connected to the Bluetooth?" Like, the way we talk about Bluetooth apparently has changed since we downloaded our policy as well. So I think, yeah, that is really important to review, because it also makes you sound, it makes the whole policy sound irrelevant if you're talking about irrelevant things. They then don't know what's important, right?
Right. Like, SQL servers, you run into that occasionally, but those even get tweaked. And like, if we run into an Exchange server, yeah, I can pull in a template if there is like an absolute need for it, but 99% of the time, it's no longer needed, especially for the size businesses we're working with.
Anybody else have kind of practices of what they're doing with assessments right now? Or other questions to kind of get some group think around it? Tim, thanks for throwing that in the chat, by the way. All right.
Yeah, that's actually Alex's, but that'll work.
Well, I feel like that'll be all right.
So I'm curious, Kirk and Tim, it sounds like you both are pretty active with them. Once you've done the assessments, how are you using that data? I mean, obviously, we've all been in the position, nobody's going to fix the 15, 20 different things that are bad all at once. How are you doing the process around prioritizing for them and then continue to evaluate as you meet with them, which ones to tick off next, and just kind of logically working through that with customers?
I think for us, it's a matter of, if they don't have backups or they don't have offsite backups, that's kind of a number one thing. I think as you go through the assessment and you see like, are people using the same password over and over again? Those are some easy fixes because you can set up a policy. When you're dealing with, for example, a server that's out of date, end of life, you bring that up and it's kind of a discussion. You're kind of pushing that if this server dies, you are going to have to pay hourly because we cannot call Dell to come out and fix it. I think you can see higher priority things like phishing testing and training, definitely important, but is that as important if their office blew up tomorrow, that they have phishing training, but they don't have backups? So it's kind of ranking the priorities and you kind of see it for yourself. And then we usually choose, between 4 and 5, kind of depending on how good the client is. You don't want to overwhelm them with here's the 24 action items because they're not going to choose one, or they're going to say, well, now you're just gouging me for money. You need to come across as a trusted partner. And the way that I bring it up is it's your business. If you don't want offsite backups, that's on you. But I am telling you this risk. And you want to wait for a quarter because of budgets, that's fine. But I'd rather have the conversation with you right now as opposed to a Saturday night when you're calling me up going, our servers crashed and when will we get our data back? And you're kind of like, about that.
I forgot to mention on the last QBR, you don't have that covered yet.
Right. So it's a matter of prioritization. And I think we've been in IT long enough that we can figure out what is, better fruit to handle. You may be dealing with the compliance where they have a SOX audit just coming right out the gate. And so you may have to push aside like replacing a firewall because you need to get their audit completed and passed. And so there may be topics on there that you need to get fixed immediately. So it's kind of, you kind of have your standards, but then you also have to look at the client and see where they may have the most risk or most productivity gains and assess it that way.
So Kirk, while you were speaking of that, you reminded me of something that William put in the MSP Geek Slack channel that I think helps that conversation. He goes into his assessment events He grabs, I'll say it's his pre-sales. It doesn't matter really which one it is. Actually, he goes into, I lied right out of the gate, analytics by customer. He goes in and grabs all of the green on his one assessment that is going to be covered under their baseline services. Let me see what I get. I was like, I probably should grab a different assessment. So I thought this was interesting. So normally on the recommendations, right, you've got a ton of red, but for his managed service recommendation, when he goes to a pre-sales client, he will grab maybe all of the green. I'll just grab a few so as not to overwhelm, but he had a pretty lengthy list. If you're MSP if you're in the Slack channel, you can see the screenshot. He creates a recommendation from this, and this is how he proposes his managed services, so that he basically says your managed service agreement is going to make all of these things green. So he's going with like a very healthy, happy report, as Amy says, the happy colors, the green and lifecycle insights, and then presents the 3 to 5 recommendation pages of all of the red. So that's an interesting balance, because you're very right, Kirk, that if you brought 25 sheets of paper, each of which said spend X amount of dollars, right, that is overwhelming to them. I thought this was an interesting take on how to present, like, these are all of the things right out of the gate. And he had a long list. There was probably 20 items on there. Like, your managed service agreement already covers all of this. You're never going to get another recommendation that has, this to be paid for as a separate service. I thought it was an interesting balance. And take that for what it is, but just, I think the more unique ways I see people using platforms, using the platform, I like to share for sure. So I wrote a list of other pieces to bring to the party that, again, you can take or leave, but I did promise that I would, for the folks new to the party, I do want to go through just kind of a basics of the assessments right out of the gate. If you are looking for assessments to use in managed assessment templates, you will have 10 defaults out of the gate. I already showed you at the top, you can import. So we've got 3 in the chat if you want to add any. The vast majority of folks start with the default assessment and revise from there. So if you have not imported one yet, you might want to take a look at this one. You'll go over on the right-hand side and you'll see the import button. So you could import that template, and then it would come to the top library that is your library, and you could click in and revise it. So to Kirk's point, right, if you haven't revised an assessment in a year and you want to go take a look, you absolutely can go in and tweak pieces. A couple of things. If you want to revise an assessment, you can edit language on an item. It'll keep all of your old data for sure. You can move things around in a category. You don't want to move them out of the category. But if you want to move things around, if you delete an item, then it's going to warn you, right? This item is in use or this response is in use. So it actually changes the template across everybody. So you don't want to delete an item in a template that's in use. If you're going to delete, either stop using it, archive it and put it to the bottom, or duplicate the template and start from scratch. So then once you have your templates, you go to assessment events and you can create an event with that template. So
Marnie, when you make changes on those assessments, when you do make changes, that doesn't affect assessments that have already been run, right?
It keeps the data, but it does change the assessments that have already been run. So if you tweak language, that's why you want to think about, what am I doing when I'm making the change? If you're making a demonstrative change, like I'm going to say Sophos instead of SonicWall, right? You want to actually create a new item that says Sophos, so that your historical ones keep track of the SonicWall piece. But if you just were updating and realized you misspelled SonicWall, then you can just correct it and it'll fix all the previous ones.
Okay.
So we actually have a ticket with a big response of that just came through this week that we could share on the ins and outs on the data correction component piece. I have a new partner that is an IT glue / automate partner that is working on getting better automate of their more of their assets that are found in Automate into IT Glue. If any of you happen to have that same stack and would be willing to chat with them, if you could just DM me privately, I would love to connect you with them, because they're struggling to get their data cleaned up. But I know we have a lot of Automate / IT Glue folks along the way. Sorry, taking notes. All right, 2 more pieces I wanted to go over. Oh, and here comes Garrett now. So I'll let him get settled in. One of the pieces that I'm going to pull up is Kevin Elsing is from Elbow. He's talked on here before, so if you have run across him, that wouldn't be a surprise to us. We've done webinars with him, etc. And he actually let me put his checklist in the book that I wrote. So I am absolutely confident I am allowed to share it here, because he let me publish it and put his name on it. So just FYI, if any of you are concerned that I would do this to you, I would not without your permission, but we have permission to share this. So one of the ways that the Elbow team uses the assessment platform is with a checklist. I will put this in the chat as well. So if you want to look at it on your own or potentially use it, you have his permission. Okay. And they use this as their full process checklist of, how you can see at the top, they have an intern tech, a sales assistant, and presenter to track their progress of their way through the platform. So they do all of these pieces, like their project management board inside of Lifecycle Insights for the folks that only work inside of Lifecycle Insights. So we think that's kind of an interesting use case. You can see they've got right in there, check assets, users, and the Microsoft tab, and update that in Lifecycle Insights. And now that we have the ability to create a ticket from QBR items, their plan is they always put individual notes in there for each of the recommendations and next project pieces that they need to do. But now their next step is to create the ticket from inside Lifecycle Insights to make the next action happen in ConnectWise. So those of you who are ConnectWise partners, if you have not, taken a look at creating tickets from Lifecycle Insights, don't forget that is a new piece. Garrett, hi, welcome. I started talking assessments and then saw you join. So I want to talk about a couple things that we spoke to, and I will send this out in an email so I don't have to repaste them. But we shared 3 assessments that folks have used, that partners on this call have built and have shared for the community to use. So we've got a CMMC CIS version 8, and I think a NIST framework along the way. And then I also just put in a checklist. And then I told anyone that we're going to post in the Facebook group if anyone would like to have a group of folks that work on assessments, to let us know so that we can kind of circle the wagons on that. Did you have any specific question? You mentioned specifically resilience assessment, and the R was capitalized, which made me think it was something I hadn't previously heard of, or it could have been you were on your phone and it just came along, the capital letter came along for the party. Any comments or questions on that? I don't even know if you can speak now, because I know you were traveling today.
Hey, Marty, sorry. Yeah, I'm little delayed in a couple traveling here, but that was basically operational resilience is a term that's being used in the MSP world and other areas, but just the different approaches, what people are thinking about, and it ties into that community or sort of bulletin board. I don't know if we could do that through Lifecycle, have a section where it's like a private, internal group only that could share files or thoughts. And some of these groups have these discussion areas. So you don't have to go outside the ecosystem, but basically everybody's sharing their thoughts on operational resilience, different levels of it, and different industries. I don't have my notes in front of me, so I apologize.
Nope, that's, I think, for blindsiding you with that 1 minute into you being on the call. I think that's a fair place to start. Does anybody else have comments, questions on that, or anything different to add than what we had already talked about? And I'll make sure Garrett gets the recording, so you can kind of hear the discussion we already had, because Kirk definitely talked through kind of his pieces of how his assessment process, and Tim talked through what they've been working on. And are still working on as a group as well.
Did I hear my name? Did you need me for something?
No, I just said that you had already talked to it and it was on the recording, so you're good. I had one more piece in the land of where I try to share what support is seeing in tickets, or what we're getting a lot of questions about. And so Report Builder, Alex is, in Phoenix and presented to 60 folks this week. And a lot of folks had not been using Report Builder yet to kind of create the same view that they want to repeat over and over again. So I wanted to go through this and actually start from scratch and talk about some best practices here. So Report Builder will let you add any of these components. Again, if you are breach secure now, don't forget we have the new breach secure now report that I can pull in. That's what that looks like. If you have, if you want the ticket summary pulled over, you can update your platform. We can pull tickets over. The ticket review board, rather, we don't pull all of the tickets. But you can see as I pull these different reports, and I'm going to pull the asset list template. And I'm going to grab, you can see that I've got a library with 2 different reports. I can either grab all of my assets or my end of life assets. So I'm just going to grab my end of life assets because that comes pre-swatched, right? All of the assets that are red. So Report Builder, the notion of this is to hold the settings that you want to repeat client after client after client. So right now I'm in creative designs, but if I switch to Get Well Medical Services, I'm going to rebuild the exact same report. So you can see I've got tickets, my breach secure now, and my end of life assets for Get Well Medical Services. So this is always live all of the time. Some best practices: when you get your template set up the way you like, save as new template. So save that as, this is my 2022, right? Kirk will rename his 2022 revised assessment or whatever. But when you have your presentation set for a new client, you will want to name it by that client, right? Creative Designs 2022 January, etc. And here is why. So let me save this one and add an assessment component to it. This is where some folks sometimes get stuck. So I'm going to add an assessment summary as a component, and I want to save this. So right now, in assessment summary, there's no data here because I haven't told them which assessment to grab, right? So when I go to present, it's not going to know which assessment to pull because I haven't said to grab anything, right? So it looks like it's blank. Before you present, you have to select the assessment that you want to have for that particular client. So now when I save this, so it recognizes it, my presentation, didn't I just say save? It will pull over my assessment summary if I actually click the button. Yeah, I did. Okay, good. So that's kind of an important piece because now that I know Creative Designs has its assessment in there, when I switch to Get Well Medical Services, for example, you can see they didn't find any breach secure now data. They didn't have any. But when I get to the assessment summary page, it's blank because it doesn't know which assessment to pull for Get Well Medical. So when you go to run a report, you're going to want to grab the assessment for each of these pieces. So the end of life assets, it knows what to do with that. It says run the report the same way. But for assessment summaries and recommendations, those are unique to clients. So I will need to save, and this one is not Creative Designs. This one is now Get Well Medical. So does anybody else have some best practices that they like to make sure they use around naming or the way they've built their report builder out? I've seen a couple other pieces, but if you all want to share, I'd love to hear your take on it.
Hey, Marnie, today I was doing that breach secure now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much, saving, I understand saving the different reports and stuff, but I was presenting to the client and is there more documentation on that? Because it's some of the items didn't, and I didn't compare it against the breach secure now for that particular client, but some of the items didn't seem to be reflecting correct data. Have you seen any of that? And again,
So on this report,
yeah, exactly. It was like last login date, and then phishing emails, and what was caught. We knew that one of the users did get caught on one of the phishing emails, but it didn't show it in the report. I just and I could send it over to support too, but I didn't know if there was any caveats with this report right now.
The one thing I don't know about that is how often it refreshes. So, like sometimes if they haven't synced and we didn't sync, maybe we didn't catch something. So let me ask that question and I will send you a note to that effect of how often should that report be updated.
Yeah.
And if something happened in the background that it wasn't updated.
Yeah, I could double check. I just didn't do enough. I mean, I was just going through that with the owner, and he liked the report. Don't get me wrong, but it was just there was some questions that he had based on the report findings and stuff. So
sure. I'm pulling up the breach secure now integration policy, the documentation that we have in the help to see if there's any note on like frameworks of timing when it syncs. So let me check. That's definitely not a question I had asked previously. I don't, it just says the initial sync, but it doesn't say how often breach secure now updates or how often we do. So let me ask that question and I'll make sure I have an answer.
yeah, like I said, it might be a support question. So
I know those people. Good job. I have access. So we have seen folks that have built multiple templates for small, medium, large reporting, right? So Kirk kind of talked about how he's got, and I don't know if he's spoken before about their monthly assessments and then quarterly and then annually. So you can create templates along that same line. If you only want to talk about these 4 things at your mini assessments, or, your mini QBRs, you can do that. So you can have multiple assessments or multiple templates rather that hold kind of the portfolio of reports you want to present at a particular type of review. So if you're only doing, he said right out of the gate, they don't do the cybersecurity phishing training. You could create a template of this is the cybersecurity phishing training template that we use. And maybe there's informational, an informational page on why this is important, right? Stats specifically around that you don't use all the time, but the first time you're coming to the party with the cybersecurity phishing training, you have all of that information in one place. So you could have multiple templates to let you, use over time and replicate across clients. So wanted to share that as a practice because we've seen some folks starting to do that now that there are multiple pieces and they're not always doing all of the things at a QBR. So I think that is the list of pieces that we had. That's kind of what support had brought up from the week, some questions we'd had from the group. And kind of some best practices. If you are new and have not followed us everywhere, we would recommend that you do. But one of the places to follow us is on YouTube. And we have done we had a chat the other day from somebody, actually, they put a comment on YouTube that said, I think you should share this video with everyone for folks who onboard, because it was fast and it gave me the best overview of how to start first. So I will copy that one into the chat as well. So that's our 30-minute Thursday quality QBRs quick. And then I have one more bit of nonsense before I let you go. And that is that, we've got the Super Bowl coming up, and who doesn't love the Super Bowl for their commercials? So you'll see us out on social mocking up the Blast from the Past commercials. So think Budweiser. So as we get into Pro Bowl and football season, please QBR responsibly, folks. So that is all I had for the day. Anybody else have questions? You're gonna have nightmares, Kirk. My eyeballs on frogs. You're welcome. All right. Nice. I'm writing that one down. Our social media person can use that one. Good one. She'll appreciate that.
Problem.
All right. Well, thanks all for joining. Mark, I will see if I can get an answer, or at least go peek in that ticket and make sure they get you on. Have good weekends.